Don't skip out on the family gathering. Who cares about stuff like a parent's funeral? Get over here right now.
I couldn't believe my ears when I received that call in the midst of my mother's funeral. A family gathering? Don't skip out. Who in the world would abandon their own parents' funeral to attend their husband's family gathering? Actually, it's odd that Tom isn't even here in the first place. I was deeply struck by how shallow Tom was, and it made my blood boil. Understood. I composed myself and responded calmly. Fortunately, the funeral was almost over. Mom, just wait a bit for me. Normally, I wouldn't want to leave my mother's side for a second, but I couldn't stand the thought of Tom having his way any longer. After my mother's funeral ended and relatives began taking a lunch break, I approached my father. Dad, I'm going to see Tom for a bit. I'll be right back, so don't worry. At my word, my father seemed to understand something and nodded, sure. I clenched my fists tight and dashed out of the funeral hall still dressed in mourning attire. My name is Christina Johnson. I'm 30 years old and work at a call center. I've been dating someone for 6 months now. His name is Tom Williams. He's 5 years senior to me and works as a government employee at the city hall. Tom has a gentle face with droopy eyes, which suits his job as a government employee. Tom commutes from his parents' house to the city hall where he works. His parents' house is located in a rural area far from the urban center, and he drives to work from there. In essence, we first crossed paths when I was out doing my hobby of photography in his hometown. In a remote area I seldom visit, I found myself lost on a dark country road after sunset, feeling utterly bewildered.
Are you okay?
It was Tom who asked through the window of the approaching car rolled down. I was surprised, but honestly explained that I was lost due to my unfamiliarity with the area. Tom looked so kind that I instantly knew he was a good person.
It's quite far from the nearest station from here. Shall I give you a ride?
But I was hesitant to get into a car with a man I had just met, but Tom said, I know, and pulled out his government employee ID from his wallet to show me. I'm this kind of person. But if you're scared to get in the car, it's perfectly fine to refuse, he said, considerately giving me the option to decide what I wanted to do next. A moment of hesitation, considering it would take more than 30 minutes on foot to the station. And it was already dark. I didn't have the energy to walk to the station by myself. Well then, I appreciate your kind offer. So I got into Tom's car. He was just as gentle and calm as he appeared at first. After safely dropping me off at the station, Tom shyly asked for my contact information. I wouldn't normally give out my contact information so easily to men, but seeing Tom's character, I felt it was all right to exchange it with him. We've gone on a few dates and gotten to know each other, and 3 months after we first met, Tom confessed his feelings to me, and that's when our relationship started. Even after we started dating, I feel like our relationship has been going smoothly. Perhaps because he's a government employee with a stable job, he always seemed to have a sense of calm. Being 5 years senior, his confident demeanor reassured me. Even though I was inexperienced in love, I came to think that if I could have a peaceful relationship with him, it would be all I could wish for. It's been nearly 6 months since Tom and I started dating, and just the other day, Tom proposed to me.
If I were to marry anyone, it would be you. If you're okay with it. Would you come to live with me near my parents' house?
Tom asked me in the sweetest tone as usual. It seems that since his father is a farmer, he needs to help out with farming on his days off from work. So, he expressed that even after marriage, he'd like to live close to his parents' home. I hesitated a bit because my mother was sick, and the doctor has given her a prognosis that she might not have much time left. The hospital where my mother was admitted was in the city where I currently live, so if I were to move to his hometown, I wouldn't be able to visit my mother as easily and quickly as before. But I really wanted to let my mom know about my marriage soon, to give her some peace of mind. She was always worried about my future. Now that I was 30, so I've come to realize that marrying Tom would be the best way to reassure her. After some thought, since I had no objections to marrying Tom, I replied, yes, I'd love to. At that moment, I was so happy to be marrying Tom that I didn't mind the idea of living near his parents, thinking I could still visit my mom over time. Looking back, I realized that decision was a mistake, but caught up in the moment of the proposal, I was completely blinded by love. As soon as we decided to get married, I took the opportunity to introduce Tom to my parents at the hospital when my mom was feeling well. Tom brought his parents along, and we all met at the hospital.
It's such a relief to see Tom finally getting married. We've been looking forward to meeting you. He's not much for doing things on his own, so it's good he found a responsible lady.
Come on, Mom. That's embarrassing.
It seemed like Tom's mother, Mary, was somewhat anxious about him not being married yet, but she was happy that he was getting married to me, chatting away with a smile the entire time. Mary was quite the talker, while my parents just nodded along with it. I see. Unlike Mary, Tom's father, Kevin, tended to be more reserved, and the initial introductions mostly proceeded according to Mary's discretion. Occasionally, Tom made witty remarks to Mary, and I felt they had a good relationship as a parent and child.
So, Christina, we need you to step up and handle various things, so please make sure you're on board,
Mary said in a sticky tone at the end, leaving me feeling a bit uneasy. Step up and handle various things. I was unsure what to strive for, but without delving deeper, the meet and greet was over. Thus, after marrying Tom, I moved to live near his parents' house as originally planned. We settled in a small apartment just a 10-minute walk away from my in-laws' place. I was relieved that it wasn't a living arrangement with his parents, preferring just the two of us to live together. On the first day of moving into the apartment, the doorbell rang. Suspecting it might be some sort of solicitation, I opened the door, only to find my Mary standing there.
Oh, Christina, dear, I was just wondering what your new place looks like. Do you mind if I take a look around?
Sure. Tom hadn't mentioned anything about his mother coming over, but it seemed he knew she would come because he welcomed her enthusiastically, saying, "Come on in, Mom."
Wow, it's a bit cramped, but a pretty clean house, since you'll be taking care of the housework. Christina, make sure to clean around the kitchen and bathrooms, or dirt will pile up quickly. I've heard that young people these days don't even open windows, so make sure to ventilate regularly. Mold could grow, and it might affect Tom's health. And on weekends, come help out with our farm. Tom is tired from work, so you need to work hard instead. Also, you shouldn't make the dishes too heavily seasoned. Tom might have high blood pressure, you know.
Mary said rapidly. Although she spoke gently, there was an undeniable pressure that didn't allow for any objections. I was surprised enough that my mill would meddle in our household matters, which wasn't anticipated. Moreover, all her concerns revolved around things like Tom's tired or Tom's health is affected, centered on Tom. It's fine to adore her own child, but I wondered if it was appropriate to impose such expectations on her DIL who had just joined the family. You're absolutely right, Mary, but I also work at a call center during the day, so I return home around the same time as Tom, and I think we should share the household chores. Of course, I'll do what I can, but decisions about the couple are made between the two of us. At that time, unaware of the true extent of my mill's character, I confidently expressed my opinion. She seemed taken aback by my rebuttal for a moment, but soon I could see her expression shift to one of simmering anger.
What are you talking about? Is working at a call center busier than a government employee's job? I don't think so. Don't pretend you're doing as much as Tom. And housework has always been the woman's responsibility. That's what marriage is.
I was surprised. I felt deeply uncomfortable that my mill was imposing her old-fashioned values on me and siding with Tom. Looking to Tom for support, he awkwardly started.
Let's not go too far, Mom. Christina didn't mean any harm, right?
Right, but I reluctantly agreed with that, and my mill said, that's enough. Before turning on her heel and leaving the house, I had hoped that Tom would stand up to his mother more firmly on my behalf, so I was somewhat disappointed that he only half-heartedly defended me. After his mother left, I turned to Tom with a question. Is Mary always like that? Imposing her old-fashioned values on us? I was quite surprised, I said with a sigh. To this, Tom looked at me puzzled and said, huh, with a bewildered expression.
And old-fashioned values. I agree with her, actually. I do expect you to handle the household chores. I'll help with the form, but since my job as a government employee already involves a lot of physical work, I'd like to rest on weekends. You agreed to it when we got married, right? And please don't speak badly of my mom. It hurts me.
I was speechless at Tom's stance. What exactly is going on? I knew we'd be living near his parents, but I never agreed to take on all the household chores. The talk was about helping out on the farm now and then. But once things got going, this was the reality. Tom's mother must really adore him. And Tom, in turn, loves his mother dearly. At 35, Tom was what you'd call a mama's boy. From then on, I was dismayed by their numerous words and actions. My mill would come over without any particular reason and say things like, Tom told me he's tired today, so please make his favorite beef stew. And Tom wants to go on a trip next weekend, so we're going together. Christina, please take care of the house and the farm work. Make sure you don't slack off, pushing her own agenda. Why does Tom hardly ever communicate with me, yet he constantly tells his mother when he's tired or wants to go on a trip? It's as if his mother is more of a wife to him, and I'm just a maid. My dissatisfaction kept building up, leading me to deeply regret marrying Tom. On the weekend when my mill and Tom were away on a trip, I headed to my in-laws' place after visiting my mom. My intention was to help my fill with the farming. Although it felt odd to be helping out at my in-laws' house by myself while my mill and Tom were out having fun, I thought I might get scolded by my mill if I slacked off. Moreover, it's true that I wanted to help because my Phil is a good person.
Seriously, what are they thinking? going on a trip together and leaving Christina to handle everything alone. I'm truly sorry about that.
It seems my Phil expressed his dismay at Tom and Mary's selfishness. He sincerely apologized to me. No, it's okay, Kevin. I actually enjoy helping you out.
Do you? Anyway, how's your mom doing?
Her condition doesn't seem to be improving much. She might be, soon. I didn't want to delve into that further, so I lowered my gaze.
Christina.
My Phil looked at me intently, seemingly hesitant to share something. His hesitation suggested he was wrestling with whether it was the right time to speak. Is something wrong? He's not usually one for many words, so he might be struggling to figure out how to broach the subject. I encouraged him to share, hoping to make it easier for him to communicate.
There's something I need to tell you.
He finally began, his voice heavy with significance.
So that's the situation.
After hearing my FIL's story, I was left speechless. That can't be true, can it?
Yes, it's true. Even though you've just gotten married, I don't know how to apologize enough.
My Phil said, visibly shrinking into himself with a look of profound regret. Knowing he wasn't to blame, I urged him to lift his head. Please, look up. Even as I struggled to fully comprehend the gravity of the facts he had just shared with me. What should I do now? If what my Phil said was true, I needed to seriously consider my next steps. I looked at him, lost in thought.
I want you to do what you feel is right. I'll support you fully.
I understood. Thank you. Despite saying that, all through the night after returning home, I couldn't shake off the story I heard from my Phil. What should I do next? And how should I face Dom and my Mill when they returned from their trip? These questions preoccupied me. A month later, my mother passed away. Although the doctors had warned us that she didn't have much time left, her death was a devastating blow, particularly for my father, marking the most shocking event of his life. Tomorrow is Mom's funeral. When I conveyed it to Tom with feeling dejected, he simply responded with, "Got it." Lately, Tom had been coming home later than usual, possibly due to being busier at work. That day, my Mill came over again. Expecting perhaps some words of condolence, I was instead met with her critical gaze and harsh words. "What's with that swollen face? It's embarrassing to look like that even if your mom has passed away." My face was swollen from crying over my mother's death. Yet, without offering a single word of sympathy, she chose to mock me. And her demeanor unsettlingly pleased. Anger rose within me at her insensitivity, but I found myself too drained to express it. The day after, on Saturday, my mother's funeral was scheduled to take place near my family home. I left home before Tom and met with my father to discuss the funeral arrangements. As the chief mourner, my father had many responsibilities and seemed busy. I stood by his side, assisting him. Our relatives began to gather around, offering their greetings to me and my father. The sorrow for my mother's untimely departure was evident on everyone's faces. I noticed that even though my relatives and attendees were all gathered, Tom and my Mill were nowhere to be seen. My Phil has been here for hours, sitting in his seat. What's going on? Tom mentioned that it would take him a bit of time to prepare, but could he really be preparing up until the last minute? When our eyes met, my Phil also had a puzzled look on his face. As the funeral for my mother began, Tom and my Mill never showed up in the end. During the ceremony, I felt my phone vibrating with incoming calls in my pocket. Initially, I ignored it, but the persistent ringing eventually compelled me to step outside for a moment to check. The caller was none other than Tom. Concerned that they might have encountered an accident on their way to the venue. So, feeling a strange sense of foreboding, I answered the call from Tom. "Hello, Tom. Where are you?" When I asked in a whispering voice, Tom didn't give me a straight answer to my question. Instead, he abruptly said something completely unexpected.
Don't skip out on the family gathering. Who cares about stuff like a parent's funeral? Get over here right now.
Receiving a call from Tom during my mother's funeral, I couldn't believe my ears. I was so surprised by the harsh tone and the content of the message from Tom, who is usually calm, that I actually pulled the phone away from my ear in shock. A family gathering? Don't skip out. Who in the world would abandon their own parents' funeral to attend their husband's family gathering? Actually, it's odd that Tom isn't even here in the first place. I was deeply struck by how shallow Tom was, and it made my blood boil. Understood. I composed myself and responded calmly. Fortunately, the funeral was almost over. "Mom, just wait a bit for me." Normally, I wouldn't want to leave my mother's side for a second, but I couldn't stand the thought of Tom having his way any longer. After my mother's funeral ended and relatives began taking a lunch break, I approached my father. "Dad, I'm going to see Tom for a bit. I'll be right back, so don't worry." At my word, my father seemed to understand something and nodded, "Sure." I clenched my fists tight and dashed out of the funeral hall still dressed in mourning attire. Upon learning that a gathering was being held with Tom's maternal relatives, my Phil and I decided to head there together. It seems hearing me talk to Tom on the phone convinced my Phil that he also had something to say to them. Tom told me that the venue was at my mill sister's place. After ringing the doorbell and being ordered by Tom in a commanding tone to come in, I exchanged a surprised look with my Phil before we made our appearance before my mill and Tom. "I'm very sorry for being late." Upon my immediate apology with a sincere attitude, the relatives on my mill's side looked at my Phil and me with a startled expression.
Christina, why are you dressed in mourning clothes? It's a family gathering. You should have come in something more casual.
Tom, who had adopted a rather rough tone of speech, was visibly shocked upon seeing me and my Phil in funeral attire. That's understandable. He probably never expected us to show up in funeral attire without even changing clothes. "Oh, I'm sorry. I was told suddenly, didn't even have time to change. It's my mom's funeral today, and weren't you getting ready to attend the funeral this morning too? Never thought there'd be such a gathering." When I said that in a matter-of-fact tone, the relatives murmured "huh," one by one, exchanging puzzled looks.
Christina's mother's funeral. Why aren't Tom and Mary attending?
It seemed the relatives on my mill's side were unaware that my mother had passed away, and we were right in the middle of the funeral. My mill and Tom exchanged awkward glances. These two didn't attend my mother's funeral, didn't say anything to the relatives, and just mingled around at the family gathering as if nothing was wrong. Even when I think about it calmly, it really makes my blood boil.
Oh, hey there, Christina. Your mom passed away. Why didn't you tell me? Had I known, I would have definitely attended the funeral.
My mill put on a troubled face, acting as if she was the only one who didn't know. But such lies are futile. I took out my smartphone from my pocket and showed everyone the message in our family group chat. Oh, there's no way you didn't know. Look, I sent a message right here saying Mom passed away. Hey, all three of you have read receipts on. Mary, you did see this message, right? As if to say, proof rather than argument, I held my smartphone screen up in front of my Mill's face. I could see the relatives staring at my Mill and Tom with a heavy gaze. Cornered with no escape, my Mill started to tremble. It seemed I had struck a nerve.
Shut up. Are you trying to pull some sneaky stunt and then come at me with complaints? Do you find it amusing to bully your Mill? And you, after all, I'm the one who gave you my precious Tom in marriage, yet you're being cheeky.
My Mill finally showed her true colors, shouting as if I were the one at fault. However, the relatives who heard her outburst were simply appalled. It was clear who the villain was between me and my Mill. I'll return those words right back to you. It seems like you and Tom, who didn't attend my mother's funeral and are just killing time hanging around here, have no heart. Anyone looking on could probably see the flames of anger in my eyes. Since I usually don't show my emotions, Tom was taken aback and his eyes went wide.
That's not a nice thing to say. It's just, I guess you could say I just got a little carried away. I don't usually do stuff like this. They said it was a gathering of my mom's relatives, so I thought there might be something important going on.
Now, Tom started his own strained excuses. Even if there was something important, is there anything more important than attending your wife's mother's funeral? Even if there was, wouldn't it be common courtesy to at least let me know beforehand? My frustration was reaching its breaking point as neither my Mill nor Tom showed any signs of apologizing.
The battery on my phone was dead. I did try to get in touch.
Tom's excuses piled up, but his arguments were so juvenile that I began to feel a headache coming on. As I was contemplating whether continuing to blame my Mill and Tom would only lead to a stalemate. Just then, my Phil stepped forward and opened his mouth.
I've been listening to the conversation for a while now. You guys, what you're saying is all over the place. You're being disrespectful to Christina's mother. Apologize.
My Phil spoke in a grave tone to the two of them. Yet, even after hearing his words, my Mill and Tom remained unmoved. My Phil, just as if this were the final warning, let out a heavy sigh and opened the voice recorder on his smartphone.
If you won't apologize, I'm about to play the recording now.
My Mill and Tom exchanged puzzled looks. Knowing the content of the recording my Phil was about to play, I swallowed hard.
Christina's mom, it's almost time, right?
Yeah. According to Christina, she's pretty weak. I do visit her sometimes, but she's really thin and always hooked up to tubes.
Oh dear, then it's about time, isn't it? I'm looking forward to getting a hefty sum from the inheritance and insurance payout. Make sure you take care of me.
Of course, I do anything for you, Mom.
The voice recording from my FIL smartphone revealed an unbelievable conversation between Tom and my Mill about my mother's condition. The conversation continues.
But to make sure we get all the inheritance and insurance money, both Christina and her father could become obstacles. The inheritance and insurance payout. The recipients are Christina and her father, right? Christina being your wife, her share belongs to you, Tom, but that means we only get half of the inheritance.
Well, that's true. Mom, what are you planning?
You know, it's already decided, isn't it? Once those two are out of the picture, right?
Mom, you're scary.
Although they laughed it off as a joke, it didn't sound like a joke to me at all. The relatives also widened their eyes, staring at my Mill and Tom. A month ago, when I visited my in-laws, my Phil told me about this. He said he overheard my Mill and Tom having a sketchy conversation in the living room when he went to use the bathroom at midnight. He hastily recorded their conversation with a voice recorder, keeping it as evidence just in case something happened. I couldn't stop trembling when I found out the truth, that Tom had betrayed me and was conspiring with my Mill to go after my mother's money. I had thought Tom was so kind and the perfect partner for marriage, and yet he could plot something like this. Since that day, I was filled with doubts about Tom. Hearing the recording, my Mill and Tom began to tremble uncontrollably. They must have realized there was no escape.
What is this? This is nonsense. Stop playing tricks.
My Mill screamed, but no one was willing to believe her anymore. If it were a video, I wouldn't put it past us to create something, but when it comes to a voice recorder, there's no way my Phil or I could produce voices so realistic. Tom is slouching as if he's given up. After playing the recording, my Phil, with his face red with anger, declared,
Hearing this conversation and Christina's testimony, it's clear that Mary and Tom are up to no good. Not only did they not attend Christina's mother's funeral, but they also planned to harm Christina and her dad to steal the money. What the heck? Apologize to Christina right now.
In a rare display of vehemence, my usually taciturn Phil unleashed a torrent of words, leaving my Mill and Tom quivering in fear.
I'm sorry, please forgive me. I just wanted to live happily with Mom.
I also just loved Tom too much and made a poor judgment.
As the two made excuses, it seemed my FIL's patience finally snapped.
What? You folks seem to have no real intention of reflecting on your actions. I'm filing for divorce with Mary. Can't stand being associated with such out-of-touch people as family. What about you, Christina?
As the word divorce came out of my FIL's mouth, both my Mill and Tom's eyes widened in shock. Yes, of course, I'm divorcing him too, and I'll be collecting every penny of alimony owed to me. Thank you very much. I expressed my thoughts politely and then made eye contact with my Phil, nodding firmly in agreement. First and foremost, both my Phil and I had intended to divorce Tom and my Mill, respectively. We were just waiting for the right moment, and today we finally had a valid reason to bring it up.
Divorce? What do you mean?
Branding Tom's still okay. As for my Mill, facing the prospect of divorce at her age, her voice trembled with disbelief as she was confronted with the intention for divorce presented to her by my Phil.
How can this be? I've been a housewife ever since we got married. How am I supposed to live now?
My Mill pleaded with my Phil with a desperate look, but he just snorted dismissively and said, I don't give a damn about that. You can rely on sweet Tom, can't you? Effectively shutting her down. With that, my Mill was completely devastated and seemed utterly defeated.
Hey, do we really have to get a divorce? I was brainwashed by my mom. I love Christina. Besides, without me, your life would be tough, right? So.
Tom seemed to misunderstand, thinking I couldn't live without him. I stared him down and said, Unfortunately for you, I can live just fine on my own. I was, living just fine before I married you. Don't flatter yourself by thinking I can't live without you. Plus, I'll be getting a substantial alimony from you, right? With my final statement, Tom slumped down in defeat. My Phil and I exchanged glances, said well then, and left my mill sister's house to return to my mother's funeral hall. A few days later, I successfully followed through with my declaration and divorced Tom as planned. Considering our marriage lasted less than a year, Tom seemed concerned about public perception. He pleaded with me, "Can't we just hold off on the divorce for a little longer? At least another year?" Realizing his plea was not out of love for me, but merely concern about public perception, I, of course, rejected his request outright. Contrary to his bold demeanor on the day of my mother's funeral, he seemed to have reverted back to his meek personality entirely. Seems to have a dual personality. I realized I had been deceived by him in many ways. Of course, I received alimony from Tom. The fact that we got divorced seemed to hit him pretty hard. He lost his motivation for work and ended up taking a few months off. My in-laws are going through a divorce settlement, and with my mill also struggling emotionally, Tom seems unable to rely on his beloved mother. He's apparently holed up alone at home. Furthermore, being in a small rural area, word about what Tom and my mill have done has spread all over the place. They've started getting looks and whispers from the neighbors, making it uncomfortable for them to stay in the local area. Eventually, as if driven out, they now live in a place with no connections or acquaintances. Tom and my mill, now living together, face an uncertain future on how they will manage to get by. If only Tom had truly seen me and valued my mother, we could have had a happy marriage. This situation is entirely his own doing. If Tom doesn't regain his energy soon, he'll likely end up quitting his job eventually. He'd better try his best to continue his lonely bachelor life. I've sworn to myself that I won't fall for a guy like him anymore, who's only kind on the surface and claims his mother is the most important thing. I've moved away from Tom's hometown and started living again in an apartment near my workplace. This place really feels the most comforting. I'm better suited to living near this bustling downtown district, not in some unfamiliar countryside. I still occasionally contact my former Phil to hear about the progress of the divorce proceedings. I'm thinking about paying him a visit once the divorce goes through smoothly and is finalized. Though he's no longer my Phil, we share a bond through our mutual experiences. I believe we can continue to be on good terms. In a place without Tom, I'll continue living each day to the fullest, ensuring I honor my late mother